Hey everyone, my name is Bram and I'm the founder and CEO of Baserow. The last couple of weeks we've been working on performance improvements for Baserow 1.17. One of Baserow's USPs is working with high volumes of data. Even though Baserow was already performant, we wanted to make it even faster. In this video, I want to show you the difference in API response time in certain scenarios. I'll be comparing version 1.16 to 1.17 in a local Docker development environment with 5 ASGI Unicorn workers. Everything runs in production mode using a PostgreSQL 11 database, which is the lowest supported version of Baserow. If you're using PostgreSQL 15, it will even be faster. All this runs on a MacBook with the M2 Max processor. The first improvement is related to the performance of every request when interacting with a database that has many tables and relationships. In this example, I've created 30 tables, each with 10,000 rows and 25 fields. Each table has a link to the next one. So table 2 has a relationship with table 3 has a relationship with table 4 with 5, etc. When I open one of these tables, you see that the loading time is roughly, the initial loading time is roughly 453 milliseconds. On average, this was 397 milliseconds during testing. When scrolling through this table, you see that the requests being made to the backend, this one takes 400 milliseconds. The next one, when I scroll down, takes 369 milliseconds. The next one 377 milliseconds. On average, when I was testing this more extensively, it was 350 milliseconds. If I scroll all the way down and I would create 3 new rows, you would see that it roughly takes 650, 540 milliseconds. On average, this was 550 or 600 for me, actually. If you would update the cell of this row, yeah, on average for me, this was 550 milliseconds. And if you would delete a row, yeah, that roughly took 600 milliseconds on average. In the meantime, I've updated this Baserow instance to the latest version, which is 1.17. It's the same data, just runs a different Baserow version, and I want to show you what the change in response API response times is going to be. So the initial response time here is roughly 200 milliseconds. That's compared to the 400 milliseconds that it was before. When I'm scrolling through this data, you see that it takes like 110 milliseconds. 102 milliseconds. That's different compared to the average that we had of 350 milliseconds before. Scrolling all the way down again, creating 1, 2, 3 rows. You see it's 216, 111, 120. Before it was around 600 milliseconds. If we would make updates to those cells, it's also around the same time. Before it was 550 milliseconds. If you would delete a row, it takes roughly 227, 163. Before that was also around 600 milliseconds. So that means that it's at least 50% performance improvement in all scenarios. In the next example, I want to show you how Baserow version 1.16 handles many rows in a single database. I've created this big tables database, which is based on the project tracker template. You'll see that there are about 10,000 projects in here. There are about 500,000 tasks. If you would load this for the first time, it takes about 167 milliseconds. When you start scrolling down, you see also 160 milliseconds. The next one, 160 milliseconds as well, 155 milliseconds. So if you would add a sort to this table, I want to see what the initial loading time is in that case. The initial loading time is about 300 milliseconds here. If you scroll down, it's like 354, 282, 281. So you'll see it takes a bit more time if you've added one sort. Then we also have a table with 2 million rows here. You see that the initial loading time, this one has 30 fields or so, by the way. You see that this table has like 478 milliseconds for initial load. If you would scroll down a bit, you would see that it goes to 471. If you would add a sort to this one, let's sort on the name field again, you would see that it takes significantly longer. It's 1.21 seconds actually. If we would scroll down here a little bit more and trigger another request, you see that it takes 1 second, 1.26 seconds. So it's, yeah, it takes quite some time. And the more sorts you would add, the slower it would become. And I wanted to remind you that this is version 1.16. We're now switching back to version 1.17, where I want to open the same table as before, so the table with 500 tasks, and show you what the initial loading times are there. So as you can see, the initial loading time is like 175 milliseconds. When I'm scrolling, it's like 85 compared to 175 before in 1.16. It's a bit steady at 85, 86 milliseconds, which is good, which is a little over a 50% performance increase. If we would add a sort here, and we would start scrolling, we would see it also around 90 milliseconds. So before this was 275 milliseconds. Now it's like much faster, way more than a 50% performance increase. If we switch to the 2 million rows table, the initial loading time is 101 milliseconds here. This one already has the sort applied. So let's just keep on scrolling a little bit down here. 160 milliseconds, 89 milliseconds. And remember before this took like 1.2 milliseconds to 1.2 seconds to actually load the results. And we got this down to below 100 milliseconds actually, which is a huge performance increase, especially if you want to work with high volumes of data like this table with 2 million rows and roughly 30 fields. As you can see, we've made big performance improvements where it matters. We specifically focused on areas where users were working with lots of tables and lots of rows. And in all those cases, we've seen an increase of at least 50%. On top of that, we've also been working on general performance improvements on Baserow.io by tweaking settings and upgrading to different servers. This has resulted in a measurable average response time improvement of 50%. Combined, that means Baserow can be 75% faster when working with high volumes of data. Thank you for watching. I hope 1.17 will make a big difference for you as well.